It's funny what stays with you after so many years. Out of all the moments I've lived, school graduations, new jobs, birthdays, heartbreaks, I can still see, as clear as yesterday, the night I carved my very first pumpkin. I must have been no older than 8 or 9. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and nutmeg, though my mother hadn't baked a pie yet. She always sprinkled spices onto the baking sheet before roasting the pumpkin seeds we scooped out. My father had spread old newspapers across the table. The headlines didn't matter. They became our canvas. The scooping was messy work. Slippery strands clung to my hands, seeds rolling onto the floor. My little sister giggling every time one bounced under the refrigerator. The carving was harder. The knife was too big for my small fingers, so my father guided my hands. His voice was steady. Slowly. Don't rush. I remember the scrape of metal against pumpkin skin. The tiny give when the triangle of an eye finally pushed inward. The face we carved was uneven. One tooth stuck out more than the other, and the grin looked like it belonged to a trickster. But I didn't care. To me, it was perfect. The real magic came when my father struck a match. He lowered it carefully into the hollow space, lighting the stub of a candle we had placed inside. At first the flame wavered, almost shy. Then it steadied, and the whole pumpkin came alive. Shadows danced against the wall. The crooked grin glowed like it was in on a secret. For a moment, the entire room felt different, warm, welcoming. I didn't know then how much that moment would mean to me decades later. But as someone now in my 30s, with responsibilities heavier than pumpkin guts and nights darker than I expected, I hold on to that memory like a lantern, because life, as we grow older, has a way of testing our light. There are nights now when the world feels heavy, when I come home late, too tired to speak, and the glow of my phone is the only light in the room. Nights when the headlines on the paper aren't under my elbows but in my chest. Layoffs, bills, illness, distance. It's easy to forget the warmth of that childhood kitchen. It's easy to believe that light belongs to another time. But then I remember how one little candle inside a crooked pumpkin transformed the room. And I realized that light doesn't have to be perfect or powerful or even permanent. It just has to show up. That pumpkin taught me something about resilience. The darkness in the room didn't disappear, but it softened. The glow didn't silence the night, but it gave us something to gather around. And isn't that what we long for, even as adults? Not a life without struggle, but a light we can lean toward. I can still hear my father's words, "Don't rush." At the time he meant the carving. Now I hear them differently. Don't rush through these small moments. Don't rush past the light that's right in front of you. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if we treated our lives the way we treated those pumpkins, taking time to scoop out what doesn't serve us, to carve openings for light, to place a flame inside and let it glow for others to see. Maybe that's all courage really is, choosing to light a candle even when the night feels endless. Looking back, I realized the pumpkin lantern wasn't just decoration. It was a symbol of welcome, a crooked smile saying, "You belong here, in the warmth, in the circle of light." And all these years later, when I see porches lined with glowing pumpkins, I feel that same truth again. We are all walking each other home through the dark, one small lantern at a time. So tonight, as I sit with the weight of adulthood, deadlines, unanswered emails, responsibilities stacked high, I let myself remember. I picture that child version of me, hands sticky with seeds, eyes wide at the glow. I let that memory remind me that even in a heavy season, I can still strike a match. I can still light something small. Because sometimes, the smallest flame really does change the way we see the night. There are nights now, as an adult, when I feel a familiar darkness pressing in. Not the kind outside my window, but the kind that lingers quietly inside. It shows up in the middle of a crowded day, or when I sit down after the house is finally quiet. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, it's just heavy. The truth is, being 30-something isn't what I thought it would be when I was carving pumpkins as a child. Back then, I believed adulthood meant freedom, keys to your own house, money in your wallet, the right to stay up as late as you wanted. And yes, those things came. But so did the responsibilities no one really warned me about. Bills stacked on the counter, emails that multiply like weeds, the unspoken weight of holding yourself together when no one else can do it for you. Sometimes I walk through my neighborhood in late October and notice the lanterns glowing on porches. Children laugh in costumes. Parents carry coffee in paper cups. Leaves crunch underfoot. The world looks alive. And yet, there are nights I pass by those lanterns too quickly, eyes fixed on the ground, too consumed by my own weariness to notice the warmth offered from every doorway. That's the strange contradiction of adulthood. We long for light, but we're often too tired or distracted to lift our heads and see it. We crave connection, yet we keep walking past the very signs that say, "Welcome." I think about my own front porch sometimes. How many nights has the light stayed off because I came home late, exhausted, and didn't bother to turn it on? How many evenings did I rush past the chance to sit still with a candle, choosing instead to scroll my phone until the screen blurred? Those little acts of neglect seem harmless at first, but over time, they collect, and they whisper something dangerous. You don't have time for light anymore. It's in those moments that I feel furthest from the child I once was, the one who stood amazed at a crooked pumpkin glowing in the dark. That child saw wonder everywhere. I, on the other hand, sometimes only see the tasks undone, the weight still carried, the questions unanswered. Maybe you know the feeling, the quiet battle between longing for rest and guilt for slowing down, the pull between wanting connection but fearing rejection, the cycle of promising, "Tomorrow I'll start noticing again. Tomorrow I'll light the lantern." And then tomorrow comes, and the pattern repeats. I've learned that this is what inner struggle often looks like. Not an obvious crisis, but a steady erosion of noticing. We stop paying attention to what once mattered. We stop seeing the small lanterns lit along our path. And in doing so, we begin to believe the lie that darkness is all there is. But even as I name this, I can still remember that crooked pumpkin. Its grin wasn't perfect. Its light wasn't strong, but it was steady. It reminds me that maybe the real wound isn't that darkness exists. It always will. The wound is forgetting to notice the glow that's already there. There's a kind of ache that comes from living this way. It's not sharp like heartbreak. It's dull, like tiredness that never lifts. It shows up when you sink into the couch at the end of the day and realize you've moved from task to task without ever really being present. It shows up when the laughter of children trick-or-treating outside your door feels distant, like a memory you can't quite touch anymore. And yet, here's what I know. Struggle is not weakness. Struggle is proof of being human. Feeling this tension doesn't mean you failed. It means you're alive. It means your soul is still longing for something real. Sometimes I whisper to myself, "Don't rush." The same words my father spoke when guiding my small hands years ago. Back then, he was teaching me how to carve safely. Now, the words feel like permission to slow down enough to notice the light I keep overlooking. The pumpkin lantern has become a mirror for me. #meta. Some days it shows me how much I've forgotten to notice. Other days, it reminds me that even the smallest flame can change how I see the night. And maybe that's the quiet lesson buried inside this inner struggle. The darkness isn't only outside my door. It's in me too. But so is the possibility of light. So I pause, and I ask myself, what would happen if I lit even the smallest lantern tonight? Would it soften the edges of my weariness? Would it help me remember the child who once stood amazed? That question stays with me, carrying me into the next part of the story, because sometimes The only way forward begins with one honest acknowledgement. Yes, I feel the weight, but I haven't forgotten the glow. There comes a point when the weight of rushing past the light finally catches up with you. For me, it wasn't some dramatic crisis. It was something small, almost laughably ordinary. That's the way these moments often arrive, isn't it? Not with thunder, but with a whisper. It was late one October evening. I had come home drained, carrying my bag and the day's exhaustion with me. The porch was dark. I hadn't bothered to replace the bulb. Across the street, though, I noticed a row of pumpkins glowing on my neighbor's steps. Each one flickered with its own crooked smile, and for the first time in a long while, I stopped walking. That pause was all it took, because just then, a little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve as they passed by. He pointed to the lanterns, eyes wide, and whispered with awe, "Look, Mama, the pumpkins are alive." His words pierced me more deeply than I expected. Alive. That's what light does, doesn't it? It makes even carved-out emptiness feel alive again. I stood there, holding my keys in my hand, realizing how long it had been since I'd lit any kind of flame in my own life. The porch behind me was silent, shadowed. My home looked closed off, almost cold, while just across the street, a row of tiny flames turned a simple staircase into a place of welcome. In that moment, I felt a crack inside me, a thought I couldn't ignore. If I keep rushing past the light, I'll rush past my own life. It hit harder than I expected. I had been telling myself for months, maybe years, that I was simply busy, simply tired, simply stretched too thin. But the truth was gentler and sharper at the same time. I had forgotten to notice, and in forgetting, I had slowly gone dim myself. I remembered the child I once was, standing in my parents' kitchen, eyes wide at the glow of a crooked pumpkin lantern. That child knew wonder without trying. That child believed a flame could make a room different. And here I was, 30 years later, walking past light as though it no longer mattered. The realization hurt, but it also awakened something. Because in that child's awe was a truth I had misplaced. Light is fragile, yes, but it is also contagious. One candle, one lantern, one porch at a time, it spreads. The pumpkins across the street became more than decorations in that moment. They became a question. What kind of light am I offering the world, if any at all? I thought about the people in my life, friends I hadn't called back, neighbors I barely waved to, loved ones I texted in short, efficient replies. My busyness had made me efficient, but not alive. And efficiency without warmth feels like a house without a lantern, organized but cold. I walked up my steps slowly that night, the keys heavy in my hand. Before I unlocked the door, I looked once more at the flickering across the street. Each pumpkin glowed with a flame that could be snuffed out by one careless breath. And yet, together, they made the whole block feel alive. That was the crack moment for me, the kind of realization that doesn't vanish with sleep, the kind that lingers, asking quietly, if you don't begin to light something now, what part of you will you lose? Because that's what happens when we let the weariness win. We don't just miss out on noticing beauty, we begin to lose touch with our own. That night, I promised myself something simple. I would not let my porch stay dark tomorrow. It wasn't about decoration. It wasn't about keeping up with the neighbors. It was about choosing to show up with even the smallest flame, because I didn't want to rush past my own life anymore. As I closed the door behind me, the thought echoed. Sometimes, it isn't the darkness that steals us. It's forgetting to light the lanterns. The morning after that realization, I woke earlier than usual. The sky was still gray, the kind of pale light that makes the world feel undecided between night and day. Normally, I would have stumbled straight toward my phone, scrolling emails before my feet even touched the floor. But this time, I paused. I remembered the pumpkins across the street, their quiet glow, And I thought, what if today I chose to light something instead of scrolling past it? So I walked to the kitchen, still half asleep, and struck a match. I had a small candle on the counter, one I'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to come. I lit it, and the tiny flame flickered against the backsplash. The room didn't transform dramatically. It didn't turn into a cathedral of light, but it softened. It whispered, "You've begun." That was my first act. Small, almost embarrassingly simple. But it reminded me that change rarely starts with grand gestures. It starts with one match, one flame, one choice. Later that evening, when I came home from work, I finally replaced the bulb on the porch. As I screwed it in and flipped the switch, the light washed across the steps. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, my house looked less like a shut door and more like a welcome. I stood there longer than necessary, letting the glow fall across my hands. It felt like a promise kept, to myself, and maybe to my neighbors too. These tiny acts grew into a rhythm. A candle in the morning, a porch light in the evening, and slowly, something shifted inside me. My weariness didn't vanish, but it began to loosen its grip. I realized the lantern isn't only an object, it's a practice. A way of saying, I will not let the dark go unanswered. I began to test this in other ways. One afternoon, instead of letting my exhaustion pull me straight into the couch, I scribbled a quick note on a sticky pad. "Thank you for making this street feel like home." I left it on my neighbor's porch, beside their glowing pumpkin.
I don't know if they ever guessed it was me.
But the next night, I noticed 2 more lanterns added to their steps. Light multiplies like that, quietly, without fanfare. There were nights too when I came home heavy and didn't feel like doing anything at all. On those nights, I remembered my father's steady voice. "Don't rush." So instead of collapsing into silence, I took a mug, filled it with warm tea, and sat outside for a few minutes. The steam curled in the air, the porch light humming above me, and the world didn't feel quite so lonely. It's surprising how much these gestures matter. A porch light, a warm mug, a note of thanks. They're not spectacular, but they are steady. And steadiness is what turns realization into renewal. The pumpkin lantern became my guide in this. Every time I struck a match, I thought of that crooked grin carved years ago, the way it turned emptiness into welcome. Lighting a candle became a way of honoring that childlike wonder I'd nearly forgotten. It also became a way of proving to myself that I could still choose light, even when I felt dim inside. One night, after setting out a small lantern on my own step, I noticed a child walking by in costume. She stopped, looked up at me, and said softly, "I like your pumpkin." It was simple, almost forgettable, but it hit me with a force I can't describe, because in that moment, I realized my small act had become a part of her memory. Just as my crooked pumpkin stayed with me all these years, maybe my lantern would stay with her. That's the turning point, really. Understanding that these tiny flames are not only for us, they ripple outward. They remind others, our neighbors, our children, even strangers, that light is still here, that kindness hasn't gone, that even in the heaviest seasons, someone cared enough to strike a match. So now, when I feel the old weariness return, I don't wait for the perfect moment. I don't wait for more energy, more clarity, more time. I reach for the smallest act I can manage, lighting a candle, sending a text, leaving the porch light on. And every time, the act reminds me of this truth. Hope isn't found in grand gestures. It's built, quietly, through ordinary choices that keep the night from winning. That's how we turn realization into life, one flame at a time. When I think back to that night, the row of pumpkins glowing across the street, the child's voice whispering, "They're alive," I realized the lesson was never just for me. That small crack of recognition widened into something larger. Light isn't only personal, it's collective. It multiplies when shared. The pumpkin lantern, in all its crooked imperfection, carries a truth about all of us. Alone, a single flame is fragile. The wind can snuff it out, a careless step can topple it. But place that flame alongside others, porch by porch, street by street, and suddenly, the night is filled with warmth. What once felt like darkness becomes a neighborhood alive with welcome. That's how kindness works too. One act may feel small, even invisible. Holding a door, checking in on a friend, sending a message that simply says, "Thinking of you." By itself, it seems ordinary. But imagine hundreds of those small flames burning together. Imagine a street of kindnesses glowing quietly in the night. That's how lives are changed. Not through fireworks, but through steady lanterns of love and care. Rilke once wrote, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves." As I grow older, I think about that line often. Because kindness, like light, is not about solving everything at once. It's about being patient enough to hold the question, what small flame can I bring today? When we answer that question, each in our own way, the world begins to glow in places we thought were beyond reach. I think of parents guiding their children down leaf-strewn sidewalks on Halloween, pointing out lanterns with pride. I think of neighbors who never speak all year but whose lights flicker side by side on one October evening, silently reminding each other, "You're not alone here." I think of my own weary nights softened by a candle on the table, proof that even when I feel empty, I still have something to give. And the truth is, we all need these reminders.
The world can be heavy. We face deadlines, debts, illnesses, losses. Sometimes it feels like the dark wins more often than the light. But then a flame appears. One person showing up, one gesture of care, and suddenly the heaviness shifts, even just a little. That's the power of the lantern. Not to erase the night, but to give us something to walk toward together. The lesson of the pumpkin lantern is that our small offerings matter. We underestimate them because they don't feel grand. We forget that a smile can soften someone's burden, or that a note slipped under a door can remind a lonely soul they are remembered. But think of your own life. Think of the times someone's small kindness carried you further than you expected. Think of the words you still remember years later, not because they were profound, but because they were offered with love. That's what our lanterns are: crooked, uneven, imperfect, yet alive with light. And together, they form something far greater than we imagine. The older I get, the more I believe this. The measure of a life isn't found in achievements stacked high, but in flames passed from one heart to another. We are all keepers of lanterns. Some days the wick is strong, other days it barely flickers. But if we tend it, if we offer it, if we place it where someone else can see, then even our fragile flame becomes part of something eternal. And maybe that's what we're meant to teach the next generation. Not just how to carve a pumpkin or dress in costume, but how to light the night for one another, how to notice, how to share, how to believe that even small lights are worth keeping. Because one lantern alone can make a room feel different. But together, lanterns can change the way we see the world. So as you walk through your own season, ask yourself, what lantern can I place on my porch today? What flame can I share, however small? And then imagine what happens when all of us, side by side, decide to light the dark. #Meta. Sex 0.05.
That's the truth the pumpkins keep teaching me. That's the legacy of one crooked grin and one small candle. Hope travels porch to porch.
There's a certain kind of silence that falls after Halloween night.
The costumes are put away, the candy bowls emptied, the streets swept clean of wrappers and leaves. Yet what lingers in my memory is not the noise of children's laughter or the crunch of footsteps on sidewalks. It's the glow of those lanterns. Porch after porch, a steady line of light guiding us home. Now, years later, I hold that image close because it teaches me something simple but essential. We don't need to wait for a holiday to light the night. We don't need carved pumpkins or special occasions. The truth is, every day offers us the chance to place a lantern where someone else can see it. And here's the part I keep learning, even in my 30s. Lanterns aren't always candles or porch lights. Sometimes they're words. Sometimes they're gestures so small we almost miss them. A text that says, "I'm thinking of you." A smile to the tired cashier at the store. A mug of tea waiting for a partner who comes home late. These are lanterns too. We often underestimate the power of these acts because they don't feel dramatic. But think of the times in your own life when a small kindness softened your day. The colleague who held the elevator when you were running late. The neighbor who waved even though you barely knew each other. The friend who sent a silly meme that made you laugh when you hadn't smiled in weeks. Those were lanterns, placed quietly along your path. The pumpkin lantern reminds me that the flame doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to be present. My first carved pumpkin was uneven, crooked, and messy. Yet when the candle was lit inside, none of that mattered. The glow still shone through. In the same way, our efforts at kindness won't always be flawless. We'll say awkward words, offer imperfect gestures, stumble in our timing. But the flame of love inside those efforts still shines. And often, it shines brighter precisely because it's real. So here is the gentle call I feel in my own heart. And perhaps you might feel it too. Light something. Today. It doesn't have to be grand. In fact, it shouldn't be. It should be something small, ordinary, and real. Maybe tonight, instead of rushing straight to your phone, you light a candle on the counter while you cook. Let its quiet glow remind you that you are alive, and this moment is enough. Maybe tomorrow morning you send a short note of gratitude to someone who's been on your mind. Not a long speech, just a line. "Thank you. You matter." That's a lantern. Or maybe the next time you walk past your neighbor's house, you notice the light on their porch, and let it be a reminder to leave your own light on. In doing so, you join the chain of small flames that stretch further than you realize. Because the truth is, we never know who is walking by in the dark. We never know who is carrying a heaviness they cannot name, and your lantern, whether it's a word, a smile, a gesture, or an actual flame, may be the light that reminds them they are not alone. When I look back on my own crooked pumpkin, glowing in that childhood kitchen, I see more than a decoration. I see a lesson that has carried me through the years, that even in the darkest times I still have something to offer. Even when the night is long, I can place one flame in the window, one light on the porch, one act of kindness in the world. And so can you. The lantern doesn't erase the night, but it changes the way we walk through it. It doesn't solve every problem, but it tells us we are not without hope. And when our lanterns line up together, yours and mine, porch to porch, heart to heart, the night becomes a different place altogether. So tonight, before you go to bed, I invite you to do one small thing. Light a candle, leave a lamp on, send a message, place one lantern of kindness in the world. And as you do, remember this: the smallest light can change the way we see the night. And your light, however small it may seem, might just be the one that guides someone home.